afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the University Honors College at Middle Tennessee State University. My name is Philip Phillips, and I'm the Associate Dean. Dean Weil and I are very pleased to welcome our speaker today, who is not a stranger to this campus, and especially not a stranger to the University Honors College. As an MTSU honors graduate in what she calls the early years, Debra Hopkins was awarded a Rotary Graduate Fellowship to study at the Université de Bordeaux in France, and this initial study abroad experience shaped her career pathway in dramatic ways and led to a second expat experience as an English teacher in Barcelona, Spain. Debra has since devoted her career to supporting English learners, first as an elementary teacher in Texas, then as an educational consultant for National Geographic and curriculum developer for other publishers, training teachers in more than 30 states and over 7 countries. Debra currently serves as EL Coordinator of Professional Learning for Metro Nashville Public Schools, and she has served as a member of our Board of Visitors here at the University Honors College for over 10 years. So please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Debra Hopkins. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I am delighted to be here, and I just have to begin by saying that I cannot stand behind that lectern, and I cannot stand still. I will be moving around, and I hope y'all are cool with that. And I also put up on here my Twitter handle, right? So if anybody wants to tweet about this, just feel free to do so. This is really exciting to be back here at the Honors College. I love being here with you. I love being on this campus. As he said, I was one of the very, very earliest honor students. And he was very kind to say the early years and not tell you what those early years were. But I don't mind telling you it was back in the 70s. It was back in the 70s. And you're all right now supposed to go, oh, what? You don't look that old, right? I'm kind of waiting for that reaction. But I am delighted to be here. And what I want to do today, you see the title, Surpassing Limits, Accelerating Language Acquisition for Emerging Multilinguals. And I chose that expression very specifically, emerging multilinguals, and you'll understand more why as we continue to talk about this today. And part of the goal, what I would like to do today, is build a case for the fact that now, more than ever, global engagement, the path to global engagement begins quite literally right here in the Honors College of MTSU in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The path to global engagement begins right here. And it absolutely did for me in a very specific fashion. And you heard a little bit about that from Dr. Phillips. For example, I was an MTSU honors student back before it was the Honors College. It was called the Honors Program, and we were a little bit like scattered all over the campus, and our main hangout was in what we called at that time the NCB. Does anyone know what the NCB is? The new classroom building? Peck Hall. Yeah, that was the NCB, and we had a hangout, and we had a couch, and we thought we were really special. So I was an MTSU honor student, and as Dr. Phillips mentioned, I did get the graduate fellowship to study at l'Université de Bordeaux, Talence, the Fac de Lettres. And there I am. Y'all, that's 40 years ago. I haven't changed a bit, right? There I am, and I was so excited to be there in Bordeaux, and it was such an experience. And I will tell you, I minored in French, and I thought I was prepared until I got off the plane in France. And I realized something very quickly, and that realization caused me to really want to bear down on language acquisition. So that is where the path started. When I had been an honor student and I had all these, grades, and I was feeling really sassy, and I thought I could really speak that French, and I got off the plane and I was like, whoa, what have I done, right? I had never left the country before. This was my first experience out of the country. And so, but it was a challenge, right? And it was thrilling, and I was ready. I was ready to bear down. But what I needed to learn was this. When I got there, I had what we call, I'm going to start you on the acronym soup here, okay? BICS versus CALP. In the business of language acquisition, has anyone heard about this yet? Okay, BICS versus CALP is this this distinction between conversational fluency, where you can sit down and you can have a conversation on real familiar topics with somebody, and that is basic interpersonal communicative skills, right? And that happens pretty quickly. And academic proficiency, or CALP, cognitive academic language proficiency, that is what is required to be successful, for example, at the university level, and as you move on into a career. In a second language, you need academic language proficiency, not just conversational proficiency. Okay, how many of you, and I hope it's, I'm just going to say I hope it's everyone, how many of you consider yourself to be emerging multilinguals? If you have ever taken another language and made an attempt, if you're trying to learn another language, you are an emerging multilingual. So let me ask again, how many of you consider yourselves to be emerging multilinguals? If you want to learn another language, if you're interested in learning another language, emerging multilinguals, it's exciting to learn another language and to learn it to the level where you have academic proficiency. Well, I'll tell you what this did. This lit a fire. When I got off that plane and I thought, I have got to learn really quickly how to get from conversational fluency to academic proficiency, because I was in grad school over there. I knew I had to pick it up quickly, and I knew that that was not going to happen if they babied me and they gave me simplified text, or they tried to use simple language for me and they tried to just slow down and speak a little louder for me. That was not going to accelerate. You don't accelerate by slowing down, right? So I wanted them to help me speed up, and they did, and that lit a fire. So when I came back to the United States after my year of fellowship, the thing I knew I wanted to do was teach and to work with emerging multilingual children, immigrant children, who came into this country with tremendous enthusiasm and desire and wonderful intellectual assets, cognitive assets, and metalinguistic understanding. They had language, they just needed the new language. I wanted to learn how to help them bridge from conversational fluency or playground language to academic proficiency, to set them up for success in their careers and in life, right? So that is just a little context for the interest in emerging multilinguals and in the work required to bridge from conversational fluency to academic proficiency. So that got me into the field. I went back and I actually got my master's in ESL. So that was my next step. And I started to learn more of the acronym soup, right? I want you to take a look up there and see, given the context that I have just given you, and y'all, I see most of you have pens and paper in front of you, see, and you can even work with your neighbor here just for a minute and see how many of those acronyms you think you can figure out, right? And I'll give you one. It's kind of an easy one. It's an obvious one, but we'll start with this one. Y'all know what that one is? Okay, right, so there's that one. So see how many of those that you can figure out with your neighbor. See if you can translate this acronym soup. Okay. I want to hear how you did here. Okay, I'm going to shine my little light, okay? And let's see. Okay, we all figured out that one. That one was easy, okay? English as a second language. There's only one problem with that. For many people, English is not a second language, right? It might be a third or a fourth or a fifth. That said, what do you think that one is? Anybody want to give it a go? Come on. We're in a safe place. Ah, I heard it. English is an additional language. Who was that? It was like a voice out of, yay, that was awesome. English is an additional language. Yeah. Okay, now how about this one? Any guesses? Don't be shy. Safe space. Oh, look, English language, yes, but we're in a positive paradigm, so we're going to call it English language development. Exactly, English language development. Okay, this one's pretty easy. English for speakers of other languages. This is English language learners. This one is English learners. Let me see. This one. Yep, I'm hearing it. Non-English language background, right? These are all the acronyms, right? There's so many around. This one is languages other than English, okay? I did all of this to get around to the one that I hate, the one that I absolutely loathe, and it's the one that our government used to describe my students for years. They don't anymore, thank goodness, because we raised a ruckus. Can I tell you, we raised a ruckus. We said, no, this is unacceptable, and that is this one. loathe it. Loathe it. They're striking it now. You'll still see it occasionally, but for the most part, it is out. And do you know what that one is? Limited English proficient. Limited English proficient. Think about that. Think about the paradigm, right? We don't want that paradigm of limited anything. Do you consider yourself, if you've been studying and making good grades in your courses, do you consider yourself limited French proficient or limited Russian proficient? No, you're an emerging, you do. He said, yeah, I do. Actually do. But you're an emerging multilingual. I want to change that. I don't want you to think of yourself as limited anything. I want you to think of yourself as an emerging multilingual. So we are striking that one from the record, no more. And they actually are striking that. And now the government is actually calling the kids English learners, which is better. So why is this important to us, and why do I say global engagement starts right here? The world comes to Middle Tennessee. I work now in Metro Nashville Public Schools, and this might surprise you just a little bit, but I'm curious. I'm going to give you another little quiz here. Metro Nashville Schools has 82,000 students, okay? 82,000 students. I want you to just again, turn to your neighbor. We're going to ballpark it here. Don't be shy. There's no wrong answer. This is not going on your permanent record or anything, right? So how many active English learners do you think are enrolled in Metro Nashville Schools? Out of 82,000 kids, how many are learning English as a new language? Just turn to your neighbor and see if y'all can kind of come to consensus, ballpark that. Write it down. Write down a number. Did you write down a number? Okay. I have a question. How many of you, the number you wrote was under 1,000? 1,000 to 5,000. Anyone? Don't be, look at y'all. Y'all are just like, I don't want to be wrong. 5,000 to 10,000. Okay. 10,000 to 15,000. More than 15,000. Oh, wow. That is interesting. Okay, here's the thing. Nobody's really wrong in that kids from non-English language backgrounds, they're significantly over 15,000. But the kids actually receiving services, English language support services in the district, when I retrieved it in the data warehouse, was 13,499 kids who are receiving services. What that means is they took an English language proficiency test and they scored lower than a 5 in one or all of the domains, listening, speaking, reading, or writing. You have to score at least a 5 across all domains to exit out of services, or you can be opted out by your parents, right? So 13,499 active English learners. Almost literally from A to Z. Only a couple of letters missing there. This is just a sampling, a tiny little sampling of the countries that the students come from in Metro Nashville Schools. Everybody thinks that they're all from like one particular region. No, they are from all over the world. I know your honor students, you see those blue letters and you wonder, what are those blue letters for? That was just reminding me the only letters that are skipped are O and W and X. Every other letter is represented, right? And sometimes multiple times. Do you want to know the one up there that surprised me the most? This one. What? Right? The Holy See. We have a student enrolled from the Holy See in Metro Nashville Schools. I was just amazed by that. But look at, I mean, it's fantastic. I will tell you, I work in the Office of English Learners, and every day is such a joy because it's like a mini United Nations. The world is constantly coming into our office and enrolling. It is the most beautiful experience in the world. And especially for someone, like I said, I grew up in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I never left the country until I graduated from college. I didn't meet someone who spoke another language until I was at MTSU. That's how sheltered that I was. The whole world opened up, and oh my, it's amazing to work in Metro Nashville Schools. So out of those 140 countries, how many altogether languages do you think are spoken by all the kids in Metro Schools? I'm gonna look at me, it's gotta be interactive here. So altogether, how many languages do you think that represents? How about that? 145 languages are spoken by the students. Okay, here's your next challenge, because we're talking global engagement here. So here we go. What do you think? Okay, the first one's going to be easy. What do you think are the top 8 languages other than English in Metro Nashville schools? Other than English. Languages other than English. First one's easy. What is it? Spanish. Yeah, clearly. Yeah, the first one's Spanish. Now, what do you think comes, and I'll put them out here for you, but just what do you think are some of the other languages that are very well represented in Metro Nashville schools? Top 8. Arabic, I hear, okay. I hear Mandarin. Korean, I hear Korean. Laotian, Japanese maybe. Burmese. Who said Burmese? Oh, look at you. Okay, you ready? Arabic is second. Kurdish. Y'all know you must have heard that we have a huge Kurdish population, a huge Kurdish community in Nashville, yeah. Somali. Burmese. Vietnamese. Amharic. And Nepali. Those are the top 8 languages in Metro Nashville schools. I will tell you, nationwide, that varies dramatically, right? But the populations are concentrated in the urban areas, and different urban areas will have a different set of top languages, obviously. But those are the top. But this next one is the one that kind of got me. I thought this was so interesting because I wanted to dig a little deeper and find out what other languages, because 140, right? I mean, I was an honor student. Linguistics are kind of my thing. I'm going to tell you right now, before I put this up, that there are languages there I'd never heard of. And I dare say it might be the same for you. And their size is proportional to the number of kids who speak that language in that second tier. These are languages, first languages spoken by kids. How fabulous is that? Global engagement can so totally start right here with this amazing community that we have right here in Middle Tennessee. It is so thrilling. We have translators in our office. In fact, I've sat in meetings with translators who speak Kinyarwanda. Do you know what country that is from? I'll tell you a hint. It's in the name. Yes. Say it again. Rwanda. Yeah. Yeah. So we have this incredible diversity here. It's super exciting. And the goal is top quality education for every single one of these kids. Obviously, top quality education. And it's not just a goal, but it is encoded in law. It is a civil right. Okay, and this is where I was thinking of Dr. Weil when I put up that 14th Amendment right there. You know I was thinking of Dr. Weil, because the 14th Amendment is kind of the springboard to all of the legislation and all of the legislative work that really is relevant to this accelerating of language acquisition for emerging multilinguals here in our schools. And y'all, do you recognize some of those, right? I bet you do. You're bound to. So, for example, Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, 1954. And yes, that was before I was born. Thank you very much. But just barely. Okay? And what is the famous thing? I bet somebody in this room, besides Dr. Weil, I know you know, knows the famous thing that came out of Brown versus Board of Education. If you had to boil it down into 5 words, there are 5 words that this really boils down to. Does anyone know? Oh, but that is good. You are absolutely on the right track. You are on the right track because it ended segregation in the schools. Hallelujah. That's it. Look at me. I'm just like, yay. Look, absolutely. Separate is inherently not equal. That is so important. And down on this little New York Times here, it refers back to the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson ruling that established the doctrine of separate but equal, and it just overturned separate but equal and says, no, separate is inherently not equal. And if you can read this down here, it says separate but equal doctrine is out of place in education. Absolutely out of place. 9-0 decision, you see that. Okay, so there's that. Then it got further teeth with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and Title VI in particular gives it teeth. Do you know what Title VI is all about? Protects all individuals from discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs that receive federal funding. So you discriminate against a student because of race, color, or national origin, no federal funding for you. Right? So that's powerfully important to this work. And then the one that is like the lodestone for all people who work in this field is Lau versus Nichols, 1974, San Francisco Unified School District. Has anyone heard of Lau versus Nichols? This is super interesting because what happened there is, and this is actually a picture from the historic archive of the classroom of Chinese immigrant children who, okay, if you think back to Brown versus Board of Education, it's separate is inherently not equal, so it was all about equality. So these kids got equal textbooks, teachers, equal everything, but they were all in English, right? So the distinction, the nuance here, what becomes really important here is it's not about equality, it's about what? Equity. Equity. So the kids, for students who do not understand English, are effectively foreclosed from any meaningful education. Equality is not enough, there must be equity, right? And so constantly citing Lau versus Nichols in the work for accelerating English acquisition for emerging multilinguals, because if you don't have equity, they don't have the same opportunity. Okay, so that's Lau versus Nichols. I'm only going to mention one more, but because it's a little more recent and it's super interesting too, it is actually referred to as the Mexican-American Brown versus Board of Education, Tyler versus Doe in '82. What they decided in Tyler, Texas was that they were not responsible for educating immigrant children who were here undocumented, right? And the Supreme Court completely overruled that, of course, and they said states cannot constitutionally deny students a free public education on account of their immigration status. And that gives me goosebumps still to this moment, yeah, because this is so important. And people have pushed and pushed and pushed back on that. But it was not even closed. It was not even, there was not even debate. You cannot deny students a free public education on account of their immigration status. So all of these little pieces of legislation and these court cases have informed the work and the passion. Can you see that there's just a little bit of passion about this work of that we're doing? So it's a responsibility, it's a legal obligation, and it is a mission. It is truly a passionate mission that was born right here through my experiences at the MTSU Honors College, right? To provide all students with opportunities to engage with and master grade level standards. Do not slow down, do not water down, do not baby me. I am capable of so much more. Lift me up, right? And offer linguistic scaffolding without compromising rigor or content. But it seems obvious, right? It seems like, well, of course you do that, but I will tell you that there is so much pushback. So much pushback. Oh, it's too hard. We can't do this. They don't speak English. We can't do this to them. This like notion of giving considerate text, which is not very considerate because it just slows down and waters down. It slows them down from reaching the very same finish line that every other student has. All these students share a common finish line. Right? So we have to get them there. And to reach that finish line at the same time as kids who start way ahead of you, what am I going to have to do? Accelerate. Absolutely. So I'm going to break for a minute because I've been talking a lot here, and I just want you to turn and talk to your neighbor and just, I know it seems obvious, but we want to just cement it. Talk to your neighbor about how this little sequence that we just went through relates to our overarching theme of global engagement. So turn to your neighbor, and if someone's willing to share out, indicate to me because we're in a safe space, okay? So share for just a moment. Like all good teachers, I seated the room. I went around and kind of voluntold a little bit because, you know, if you don't voluntold just a little bit, if you ask, who wants to share your thinking, you get crickets. And I know that. That's a voice of experience, and I didn't want crickets. And so, who would like to share?
Okay, this is going to be voluntold me first.
Speak nice and loud.
Okay, so with global engagement, how it relates to us and all that is really good because, I mean, I'm a business major, as everyone kind of hears because I always talk about it. It's just always great to see that because when you go to an office space, you're no longer, it's just not going to be one group anymore. It's no longer one. Usually it used to be that way, but it's not. You're going to have multiple different cultures, multiple different people, and just learning a language is not really going to help you. You got to be able to be engaged in it. You got to have to really have the understanding of it to be able to communicate with other people effectively, and being able to truly get work done. And that's just, I don't know, it's amazing. Plus, you don't want to piss people off because, like, sometimes, like, I have this with my parents all the time. Like, they just think they don't know very much, and then they're like repeating things 12 times, and you know how annoying that gets. So yeah.
I love it. No, that's great. And what was your surprise up there that you saw?
My language was the second to last. I'm not, so I didn't think we were big enough to be on there, but yeah.
I thought that was really cool, that his language was one of the top 8 in Metro Nashville. Would anybody else like to volunteer? Yeah. Oh, Josiah, hi.
Hey, I'm Josiah. So I think a big part of global engagement is not just the experiences you have when you visit other countries, bringing in their culture and trying to appreciate them and sort of grow in your understanding of it. I think the other half of it is people from other cultures being here in the United States and the way that we treat them, especially when it comes to education.
Fantastic. That was excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else who hasn't been voluntold but is burning to share? No? Okay. But I appreciate that. Those were a great contribution. So the question becomes, and it always gets down to this, what does this look like in a real classroom? And I will tell you, my last classroom, I had students from 14 different countries who spoke 9 different languages, and they were the newcomers, and so they maybe had 1 or 2 words of English. And that was a middle school classroom. And the question always becomes, how on earth do you deliver grade level standards in that kind of diverse context? But I'm here to stand here and tell you that not only can it be done, but it is tremendously exciting and rewarding to do this work. But again, it does not involve, and it will never involve, slowing down, watering down, and giving like 3rd grade text to a middle schooler because that's their level of English. No, it will never be about that. Although I will tell you, there are some still to this day who think that might be, but we've been working very hard with the Council of the Great City Schools, with Mary Ann Kukiari, Lily Wong Fillmore, a lot of people doing great work out there to shift that paradigm. It will never be about slowing down and watering down. But I'm just going to give you an example. I'm going to show you 2 pieces of text. And then you look at those texts and think, which one do you think is more likely at first blush to be chosen to teach to English learners? Okay, and obviously elementary example. All right, so which do you think is probably more likely, the first or the second? The first, and why? Simpler, and there's this notion that considerate text is doing our students a favor. So let's give them something that's simpler, right? So the first one is definitely more likely. But which one of those 2 texts most closely resembles something they're going to encounter on a high-stakes test? The second one, exactly. So what are the larger implications of that? Exactly. So what is the problem? English learners' access to texts that reveal really how the language works has been severely limited because they're thought to be too difficult, right? And so what the truth of the matter is, simplified materials make it harder to achieve the level of English students need because it is not true to the target demands of the language. Does that make sense? But is there a little part of you inside that still resists, that says, yeah, but how? How do you do this, right? How do you make this work? Well, it's not by loving them to failure. This is my boss. This is a quote from my boss, who is the director of the English Learner Office in Metro Nashville Schools. He said, people for too long have been loving these students to failure, or otherwise, as is known in the South, right? Bless their hearts. I have to always translate that when I go outside the South. People don't understand that is not nice, right? You do not want to have your heart blessed, okay? So, bless their hearts. Or ESL, English slower and louder, right? No, it's not about that, right? Because what the result of that is typically what we call LTELS, your last acronym. Does anyone know that acronym? LTELS. Long-term English learners. We have kids in our school system who were born in the United States, have lived here their whole lives. Some of them have never left, like Davidson County or Rutherford County, and are still being served as English learners, still cannot pass the English language proficiency test. They are long-term English learners. Now, I bet you have a theory how that might happen. At home. Right? What contributes, and then what at school contributes to the fact that they have not yet achieved academic proficiency? Because they've been given what? Simplified, slowed down, watered down test. And it's serious. It leads to a massive achievement gap. A massive achievement gap. You see, in 2013, it's hard to get like the very, very latest data, but that's pretty recent. Proficiency levels that were 23 to 30 percentage points below their English-speaking peers. Only 3 to 4% of 8th graders demonstrating proficiency in math or reading. Does that upset you? Because that upsets me. That upsets me seriously, because these kids are capable of so much more, and I'm going to show you. Oh my God, so much more. And it seriously affects the graduation rate. And we see this at Metro, you know, and that's why we're working so hard to turn this around. The graduation rate among English learners is the lowest of all student subgroups. And we got to fix this, right? So what's the solution? High expectations. Acknowledge, honor the assets that these students bring in. Acknowledge their cognitive gifts, their metalinguistic gifts, all the assets, and use them as a springboard. Explicit instruction to engage with complex text. We're going to talk about that. And on-grade level materials with upwardly spiraling complexity. That is the solution, not continued slow down, water down. And this is my slide to remind me to say, put the shoe on the other foot, right? Put the shoe on the other foot. And this is how I often explain to people when they resist this. It's like, okay, imagine, for example, that you and your family were picked up and you were moved to another country where the language is not your own. I have been there. I sat in classrooms where the teacher was speaking French to me. I did not need her to baby me. I wanted acceleration. I wanted scaffolds. I wanted to be scaffolded up, not watered down, right? So put the shoe on the other foot. Here's the theory of action that we work from in Metro Nashville Public Schools. These kids are absolutely, emerging multilinguals are fully capable of complex thinking and engaging with sophisticated content across all language modes. Absolutely. No question about it. And I've seen it over and over again. High expectations are the answer. Fortified input, another way of saying it, leads to fortified output. Right? It just makes sense. Right? Are you just saying, well, duh, of course. It only makes sense. And yet that has not been the practice. That has not always been the paradigm in ESL pedagogy, and so we're working very hard to shift that. So, well, again, what does it look like? Here's a standard. I picked a high school standard. And to be honest, I did not pick the high school standard. I will tell you, I was invited by the social studies director at Metro Nashville to do a presentation. And I said, okay, give me a standard that you want me to teach from and you want me to work with social studies teachers who have no training in second language acquisition and who need to know how to serve the English learners in their classroom. I said, so just give me one that's like a high leverage standard you want me to cover. And this is the one he gave me. Describe the impact of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. It's like, okay, you're not going to throw me a softball, are you? He just threw me a hardball, right? So that is what I work from. But the truth of the matter is, every single one of those standards, our English learners are also held accountable for. So every standard, they must be taught a grade level standard, not watered down and not slowed down. So what do? First step is, and it says choose text that is complex and compelling. And by text, I don't mean necessarily the textbook. Right? How many of you have found your textbooks to be the most compelling text you've ever read? Super exciting, right? Lean in, super compelling. No, when I talk about text, this requires a little bit of work, but like the first thing I did is I went out and I searched the internet and I looked for images and graphics and movie clips and all kinds of diverse texts that were compelling and that would cause the students to lean in. Got to hook the students with compelling, worthwhile content. Worthwhile content. Because that leaning in is really important, because if it's not compelling and interesting enough to make you want to lean in, you're not going to be willing to engage in the productive struggle. And that safe space for productive struggle is really, really important in any learning, but most especially in language acquisition. If you don't feel like you're in a safe space for productive struggle, what happens? You sit back and you're kind of reticent and discouraged, and you don't lean in and engage. So we want to encourage productive struggle. Look at a passage like that. At first glance, that looks like that could be really daunting for English learners, right? That could be a really daunting passage. But one of the keys to what we do in Metro Nashville schools now, in the paradigm that we're setting in place, is not to give like these big, long texts all at once, but to do what we call chunk and chew. Right? Chunk and chew. And this is an example where you chunk and chew. You take a chunk that holds really significant content that helps move the understanding forward, and you chunk and chew with what is called a close read. You see some words that are highlighted there. Those are words that we're going to develop contextually. What we don't do And what research is totally behind is you don't teach vocabulary. Have any of you ever had to learn a language by learning a list of words? Out of context, just like a list of words, and then you learn to conjugate the words, and then if it, heaven help us, Latin or German, and you have to decline too. You have to conjugate and decline, right? It's like, oh my God. I still have it burned in my brain, like from Latin, femina, femini, femini, feminam, femina, femini, feminorum, feminis, feminas, feminis. What am I going to do with that? I don't know, but I can still decline. But I'm not that good in Latin, though, right? But so we're going to contextualize all our language development within grade level content and looking at relationships. So we're going to take a chunk, we're going to chunk and chew, we're going to scaffold up. The teacher is going to really study that piece of text and say, okay, what's going to be challenging to my learner? Where do I need to bear down? Where do I need to scaffold up? I'm not going to water it down. I'm not going to simplify it. I'm going to scaffold up. The teacher has to really think about that in advance, right? And then when you look at vocabulary, you don't look at it in isolation, but you look at it in the context of ideas or relationships. Okay, look at these three words: coerce, influence, affect. This is a little thing called shades of meaning. Okay, I'm going to put you to work again. Shades of meaning. Okay, what this activity is you take the words, which are all related conceptually, and you, in your head, you put the word that you think has kind of the lightest meaning. The kids, we actually give them paint chips and they write them in the squares, right? So the lightest word goes in the lighter, the medium word in the medium, and the word that carries like the heaviest meaning, right, would go in the darker. So if you had to rank these words from that which is kind of has the lightest sense to the really most intense sense, how would you order them? And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of debate on this, so don't think there's one simple answer. You just have to be able to justify what you've done. Okay? So, there at your desk again with a partner, put these in order from the lightest shade of meaning to the most intense shade of meaning. Okay? Go for it. Okay. Which one did y'all put first? I did too. I put that first too. I did. Now, this is, which one did you put in the middle? Oh, interesting. Okay, now see, this is always fun when there's a difference. Okay, so some say coerce and some say influence. You said coerce. Why do you put coerce second?
Well, because coerce is kind of negative. It's making someone do something using force or threats, whereas influence can have positive or negative attitude.
Oh, okay. That is a very, this is where you start getting into some interesting conversation and you start really cementing your understanding of the words. Did somebody do it differently? I love that. That's good. Who did it differently? Yes, sir. You kept in that's interesting. So you put coerce first.
I look at it as far as what words you would use more, like what words are most useful to just in everyday person areas.
Oh, okay. See, that's great. As long as you can give a valid rationale for the way you've ordered them, I accept that, because what that means is you've engaged deeply with thinking about the words and their meaning and their uses, right? And that's what we want. We don't just want, did any of you ever, like in elementary school, go to the dictionary, copy the definition, write the word 5 times, and use it in a sentence? Right? Ugh. Yeah, no, right? So this is the way that a lot of people do it, but that's not necessarily to say it's the right way. It's just a way to do it, and it's just being able to give your rationale, as you very nicely did, for why you made that choice. That is engaging in contextualizing the language development. Can you see how that will get you to a higher level faster? On the home stretch here, bring in interesting visuals, right, to contextualize. That's what we're doing. We give the kids language frames. Right? And in this, our language objective is comparing and contrasting, so we give them language frames so they have an anchor to speak out and to start to engage with the content and talk about the content. Can you see how this accelerates and scaffolds up? And we encourage productive noise. That's Noni Lasso out of Harvard coined this expression, productive noise. We all know what not productive noise is, right? We all are very familiar with non-productive noise, but productive noise is critically important when learning a new language. You got to use it, you got to dive in there, right? And again, productive noise within a context of safe, productive struggle. So, the last piece, and I'm winding down now. We often narrow down, and you might hear this term, and you can Google it, and you'll find a million citations of what is called a juicy sentence. Sometimes instead of a whole passage, we just, boom, hone in on a sentence. Right, and really work the sentence. And again, it's about teaching vocabulary not in isolation, but in chunks of ideas, in thoughts. Right? And just chunking and chewing in that fashion within a juicy sentence. And I could do an hour on that, but I won't. But the juicy sentence has been a real valuable tool again for scaffolding up and accelerating language acquisition. So, can you see now how in the work in Metro and work that, again, thanks to the council and Marianne Kukiara, Lily Wong-Fillmore, pushing this work out to accelerate and not slow down and water down. And it's having dramatic results. Kids are getting to the finish line. I have to show you one really compelling example in close. This is a second grade example. It's a child, and I thought it was coincidental, September 25th, but this one was 2014. This is a grade 2 child, new to the country, and their writing prompt was, explain what you learned about rocks today. Can y'all see it? Kind of, sort of? Yeah. It's an inventive spelling. Okay. Yeah. So, it's a brand new to the country, brand new to the school, brand new. Okay. Using the scaffolding up techniques that we talked about, the juicy sentences and the contextualized language development, shall I show you what this exact same student wrote 6 months later? Are you ready? That's the exact same student. Second grade, ELD 1. Explain how the penguin chick grows and develops. When the baby chick hatches, it still stays in its dad's brood pouch to stay warm, but when it gets bigger, it does not fit in the brood pouch. Oh my God, is that not fantastic? Is that not thrilling? Who would doubt that our emerging multilinguals are incredibly capable when you scaffold up, when you accelerate instead of slowing down? This is what you get, right? I know, right? Wow. So is that exciting? Does that inspire? I hope that inspires and that hope that makes you smile. And again, so my path to global engagement is full circle, started here in the honors program when I got that study abroad. All of you are going to try to study abroad, right? Everybody in this room is going to be sure to study abroad because that's an incredible opportunity. My path that I chose was education, and I've now spent over 30 years serving emerging multilinguals and their teachers with a passion that I cannot even begin to begin to express, but I hope you got a little hint of today, right? So there you go, and I'm now open to questions. Yes, sir.
On that table you had with the problems and solutions, you only listed 3 solutions. Do you think there are more?
Oh, absolutely there are more, but they're all related to that. I'm glad you asked that question. And part of that is simply just a factor of like time and trying to chunk the information so you could chew on it, right? But the solutions, though, are all related to that theme of accelerating rather than slowing down and watering down, scaffolding up. There's a lot of conversation now in the education world about what good scaffolding is, and it's hard to define, but the community of professionals in the field of English language learning are working on that and working on articulating in a broader sense. And I will tell you one place you can turn to. The Council of the Great City Schools published a framework for higher expectations and instructional rigor for English learners, and that lays out more of the solution. And I was a co-author on that, so I'm just plugging it. Totally plugging it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you think that ELL teachers should, conjoin with professors of foreign language and other teachers of foreign language? Because at least I've experienced that ELL students have studying foreign language in high school and university. So
I love that you asked that. I do. I will tell you that there's certainly a lot of potential synergy there. There is. And in fact, June McCash invited me to come speak to her French class once, and I actually experimented with, and that was back in the day obviously too, right? But I experimented with some of these techniques with her French students, and they work very, very well. So yes, there would be a lot of synergy. I think this notion of accelerating and contextualizing clearly would work beautifully. I had a question earlier today about when I learned French, and because as I mentioned, it started off very limited and conversational, and I minored in French here, and I thought I was really but what really caused me to learn French quickly was when I got there and I had to get accepted to university, and I had to rent an apartment, and I met a guy named Jean-Paul Marie Rivière. And that contextualized my language development. And absolutely accelerated it. Yeah, so yes, did that answer your question? Okay, and did I answer your question too?
Yeah, but if you know some off your head, I'd love to know some more solutions because everyone would hear it.
Like what more solutions for? Would you like to have a sidebar? Because we can have a sidebar, but I would because that's kind of a long conversation.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm going to stay. I will hang around, and we'll talk about that. And I'll point you in the direction of some resources you could look at. Are you interested in the field?
Public policy around that. That's a big thing.
Council of the Great City Schools, cgcs.org. We'll talk about that. Okay, awesome. Yes, sir.
So with how you explain with hiring us to teachers who do not have any background, I want to teach the ELO course. I experienced that having several ELO teachers switching on me throughout high school. How do you teach them to have exactly the same slide that you have? So teaching by chunk explaining by pieces, which one musician did that, but second one not necessarily because she didn't have any experience. How do you teach them to do that?
Okay, did everybody hear the question? How do you prepare teachers of English learners in this instructional sequence and pedagogy? And that's a really good question. It's one that in particular urban school districts, but all districts that serve English learners deal with that. And what we've done in Metro Nashville is we've created a syllabus, a 3-tier sequence for professional development for any teacher who works with English learners, and that is in fact all teachers ultimately in Metro Nashville, that starts with the fundamentals of language acquisition and that moves into, it scaffolds teachers up, right? And gets them to the point that they can do this. But it's a real specific scope and sequence for teachers for professional learning. And that's what we're doing. And it's a journey. And we're not all there yet, right? But it's a journey, but we're doing it. Good question.
We've got time for one more question.
One more question? Okay, yes, ma'am. Sorry. I'll get yours. I'll stay.
Thank you so much, because I'm actually wanting to go into English as a second language, and so this is incredible. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts as far as one-on-one instruction and group teaching? And also, I noticed that you use a lot of classroom interaction, and just kind of your thoughts, if you could expound a little upon what you think of maybe even the peer interaction that you've used.
Well, that's like a multifaceted question, isn't it, right? That is super multifaceted. But number one, most large urban districts or districts with a large population of English learners have multiple service models. Metro Nashville has multiple service models that involve, there are sheltered classes, there are push-in or co-teaching classes. There are a number of different models. Rarely is there the luxury of doing one-on-one or small group anymore. It's typically within the context of inclusion or immersion. So we're having to get more sophisticated in our techniques. And then wait, your second part was? Oh yeah, the peer interaction. Oh yeah, that is critically important. You can tell I'm a big believer in that because it ties back to what I said before. And y'all have all seen it in classrooms, even now today, where it seems like the professor is having a dialogue with one person in the class because that one person is doing all the answering and all the interacting, or one or two or three, where the goal in English language acquisition class is to get everybody involved, 80 to 90% of the students involved at all times. Thus the peer interaction, and you saw me very naturally do that in here because you want everybody making productive noise, not just the teacher. Yes, thank you. Sure. Okay, is that it?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you.